He had a reputation for keeping a low profile, but Nigel Wright, the Prime Minister's chief of staff, got caught up in the Mike Duffy Senate expense scandal, and now it's cost him his job. Wright resigned this morning. Amanda Pfeffer is on the story and joins us now with more from Ottawa. So, Amanda, definitely surprising news on this holiday weekend. How exactly did all of this unfold?
Well, what's so interesting about this is that as late as Friday, the Prime Minister was standing beside his Chief of Staff, Nigel Wright, saying that he was not asking him to resign and that he stood behind him. On Friday, also interestingly, the Conservative MPs that normally participate in programs, political programs like CTV and the CBC's Power and Politics, both at the very last minute pulled out and did not participate in those shows. And now today, Sunday, in the middle of a long weekend, a long holiday weekend, we get this announcement about the resignation. Now, Nigel Wright, again, Chief of Staff to the Prime Minister, and you'll recall that last week it came to light that Nigel Wright had written a personal cheque, $90,000 to Senator Mike Duffy in order to clear perceived debt, his housing claims, and that effectively ended the audit, the investigation, Mike Duffy's participation in those audit procedures. When those revelations came to light, Mike Duffy on Thursday resigned from the Conservative caucus. Friday, we saw Pamela Wallin resign from the Conservative caucus. And now today, we see the Chief of Staff resigning. And let's have a look at what he said. He said, "My actions were intended solely to secure the repayment of funds, which I consider to be in the public interest, and I accept sole responsibility. I did not advise the Prime Minister of the means by which Senator Duffy's expenses were repaid either before or after the fact." Now, the Prime Minister himself has responded to this. He says in a statement, quote, "It is with regret that I have accepted the resignation of Nigel Wright as the Chief of Staff. I accept that Nigel believed he was acting in the public interest, but I understand the decision he has taken to resign." So the Prime Minister, in the middle of this long weekend, has accepted the resignation of his Chief of Staff.
So really significant development on this ongoing story, Amanda. Any word yet on who might be replacing Nigel Wright?
We're already hearing that Ray Novak is going to step into his shoes, at least in the short term. It's unclear whether that's going to be in the long term. And Ray Novak, of course, has been Principal Secretary in the Prime Minister's office, also very close to the Prime Minister, and considered, for instance, if Chief Novak, if Nigel Wright had not been there, it would be Novak, in fact, who has the closest to the Prime Minister's ear. So Novak, again, has been at his side. He's in his mid-30s now. He's a young man, and it has been said things like Ray is effectively the Prime Minister's closest confidant. So that who is expected in the short term, our sources say, to step into Mr. Wright's shoes.
As well, Amanda, we know that both the Commons and Senate resume after a break. What are we expecting come Tuesday?
Well, I think the Prime Minister probably hoping that this will shut this chapter down, the connection between Nigel Wright and this $90,000 check effectively connected the Prime Minister's office to the scandals swirling around the senators, particularly Mike Duffy, Pamela Wallin, who have now recused themselves from the Conservative caucus. The opposition, of course, do not think that's the case. They are going to, as soon as Parliament is back on Tuesday, I think, hammer away on this. But the first gauntlet that the Prime Minister has to go through, of course, is his own caucus, many of them grumbling about this, and they are meeting on Tuesday morning before the Prime Minister heads off to South America for a trip there.
All right, we'll stay on it. Amanda, thanks for bringing us up to speed on all developments. Amanda Pfeffer in Ottawa. So again, if you've just joined us, the Prime Minister's Chief of Staff, Nigel Wright, has resigned. Rest assured, we're working the phones to get political reaction to this significant development. Right now, on the phone is Liberal MP Bob Rae. So, Bob Rae, let's start with your reaction to Nigel Wright's resignation.
Well, I think it raises as many questions as it answers. I don't think it answers any. How did this payment come to being made? What conversations did Mr. Duffy have directly with Mr. Wright about this? And if Mr. Harper didn't know, well, why didn't he know? Because it's unbelievable to me that the Prime Minister of Canada would not be aware and would not be asking questions about the circumstances in which a payment of this kind was in fact made. it's not actually legal for a senator to accept a payment which is going to have the effect of influencing what governments do. And in this case, the payment received had a direct impact on the conduct of an audit into the activities of Senator Duffy and other senators. And in fact, we know that Senator Duffy's audit was shortened, was changed because of the fact that he made this $90,000 payment, and that he made this payment because Mr. Wright gave him the money to make the payment. So it's not, you know, people's intentions may well have been honorable in their own definition of what is honorable, but that's not the test here. The test here is that something happened which should in no way, shape, or form have happened, and so far, Mr. Harper hasn't even found it inside himself to say this payment should not have been made, because if you look at the conditions under which we work in Parliament, people are not allowed to accept money from any outside source that would have the effect of influencing policy. That's a practice which is forbidden by the Criminal Code of Canada.
So as far as you're concerned, Wright's resignation notwithstanding, you think the Ethics Commissioner needs to take a closer look at this?
No, I don't think it's just the Ethics Commissioner. I think people have to have a hard look at what actually took place, because there are provisions not only in the Senate's ethical code, but there are also provisions in the Criminal Code of Canada. People can't accept payments if you're a public office holder which have the effect of changing the activities of government. And in this case, there doesn't appear to be any doubt that the conduct of the audit was changed as a result of the payment that Mr. Wright made to Senator Duffy.
So you say that there needs to be a good, hard look at what exactly has transpired here. How do you do that? What's the form, the vehicle by which you get to the bottom of this and get some of the many questions answered?
Well, I mean, this is not a government that's famous for its accountability. They're not going to want to answer any of these questions. Mr. Duffy has not answered a single serious question on this subject. Mr. Harper hasn't answered a single serious question, and neither has Mr. Wright. They've all made vague statements to the media, and the statements made today by Mr. Wright and Mr. Harper are classic examples of that. I mean, Mr. Harper has not found it within himself to say why what was proper on Friday and was worthy of a defense where he would send all the attack dogs out to defend what Mr. Wright had done. How did that suddenly change on Sunday morning? Is it just Mr. Wright's personal choice that he decided that, you know, gee, maybe this wasn't such a great idea? But it's not about just, you know, whether this was a lapse in judgment. Mm-hmm. A payment was made which had a direct impact on the conduct of a government investigation. There's something very wrong with that.
Bob Ray, appreciate your time today. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Ned.